What's going on, guys? Jake here, and today I'm bringing you part 2 of the series that I'm going to be officially starting for 5.4 PTR for all the changes that are coming to all sorts of Death Knights. Now, originally in the PTR, we haven't gotten much. We only had gotten actually 2 changes. But today, a whole batch of changes have dropped, and I gotta say, none of it's really bad. It's actually all really good, and one of them is actually huge, and it's going to be great for us. So let's waste no time at all and get right into the general changes. First things first, a defensive change has been happening for us. We finally got a change to one of our biggest, our biggest defensive cooldown, Icebound Fortitude. For those who don't play a Death Knight, Icebound Fortitude is equivalent of our Shield Wall or our Bark Skin. It is our biggest defensive. And previously, it had cost us runic power to cast, and that's not very good, especially if you're getting opened up on by a couple of rogues, and you don't have that immediate runic power to not only break a stun and prevent stuns from coming in, but to also protect you. So now it's an instant cast, just like Dancing Rune Weapon got previously. Now this is not going to cost a single thing to cast, which is huge. The next general change we got actually is kind of a blood change. They actually got a new passive talent at level 76 called Riposte. Riposte is actually a term used in fencing when one jouster or fencer, I'm not sure what they want to call themselves, would parry his enemy. And that's actually what Riposte does. When you dodge or parry any attack, you gain 50% of your parry or dodge as additional critical strike for 20 seconds. Now, as we know, unless some change happens to FCs, and by FCs I do mean tanks, and PvP, this won't mean nothing for blood DKs at all, because no tank is viable in PvP right now when it comes to Battlegrounds, period. But what this does mean is PvE blood is going to be hitting pretty gosh darn hard. It's actually something you can really look forward to, and there's probably going to be a big surge of blood tanks now, because they're going to be able to live and do probably a lot more damage. So good on you, Blood. You got a big buff right there. Getting actually 2 buffs in 2 weeks in a row. And now, one last thing. I wouldn't really say it's a nerf. It's more of just a general change. Is that Sanguine Fortitude originally reduced the cost of Icebound Fortitude. That part of the passive talent has now been removed. It only increases the additional damage reduced for Icebound Fortitude by 30%. So it just removes one part of it. It's not a nerf, it's just a general change because now Icebound has no cost. Now that we're done with the general stuff, let's move on to our talents. Now let's get on these talents. The first change we've actually received has gone to Plague Leech. Plague Leech was kind of the odd man out when it came to this first tier of talents. Roiling Blood was great for Blood and Unholy because it would be a great disease spreader. Unholy Blade's great for Frost because it's a quick way to apply disease before you start doing obliterates. And then you had Plague Leech. Plague Leech wasn't really doing anything. It wasn't getting picked by anybody. Nobody liked Plague Leech. But it has received a buff, where now it's actually going to attempt to convert 2 fully depleted runes. So that's a buff. That's a buff for it. Same cast, same range, same cooldown, but now it does 2 runes. So I'm not going to say it's viable, but it's a definite change that has helped it out a lot. But the next talent has received a buff that I'm very happy about, and that is Anti-Magic Zone. Now previously with Anti-Magic Zone, it would absorb a certain amount of damage and then it would break. But if it didn't receive too much damage, it would hold for 10 seconds. Usually if you're using it, it's going to get broken really fast. Anti-Magic Zone was only up for like a second and it would break. But now it's actually changed to the point where it automatically will absorb 40% for 3 seconds, okay? Previously, it would be up for 10 seconds, so this does mean that its duration got a 70% reduction. Not the biggest fan of that. I honestly believe this should last for 5 seconds. A 50% reduction is far more... It's a little more fair when it comes to Death Knights. We don't have much defensive, so I think adding 2 seconds onto it would actually be really good. But for what it does is it won't be broken. Literally, I can put down an Anti-Magic Zone and 10 Warlocks can shoot a Chaos Bolt into it. All 10 will be absorbed. Its absorption limit is unlimited. It lasts for 3 seconds, and everything aside, 40%, 40%, 40%, 40%. So that's a huge buff, and something of a nerf due to time duration, but still, Anti-Magic Zone is looking stronger, and it's something we can all really just start using a whole lot more. And you know, it actually gives a fight in this second tier with Lichborn now. But now that we're done with that, let's get on to the final talent change, and this is the one that got me a little giddy. This is the one I liked. Previously, I made a video, a new Death Knight trick, how to do some crazy healing with Death Siphon. Now, if you notice, I put Cinder Glacier on my weapon for a reason. Because Death Siphon got a 10% damage buff. Now, if you guys don't remember, the damage it does is then 150% back to you as a heal. So when it gets its damage increased, your healing gets increased, and the following clip is just going to show you what can happen. I really don't think I need to go into any more explanation. Death Siphon is looking stronger by the day. Still costing a death rune. Still just not extremely viable. Great move, fun move, not a viable move. It's the equivalent right now of a Blade Storm that can get disarmed. Back when Blade Storm can be disarmed, it was like, oh, it's Blade Storm, it's a really cool move. You know, everyone's like, oh, I'm gonna Blade Storm. And you can be like, I'm gonna Death Siphon. But the fact that it costs you a death rune still makes it far too expensive. It's far too expensive. So I can honestly say, stick with your Death Pact or stick with your conversion, because that is where it's at. Now let's go to the final part of this, is our Glyph Changes. I know, Death Knights haven't got many Glyph Changes in a really long time. And honestly, we need more Glyphs, period. We have really crappy Glyphs, to be perfectly honest. But we did get some Glyph Changes, so let's get into those. Alright guys, now let's get into our Glyphs. Our Glyphs have received 3 changes so far, and one of the changes I consider to be good, the other 2 are just mundane. While they are buffs, they're still not great. First one we're going to go over is Enduring Infection. Previously, when you glyphed Enduring Infection, your diseases were undispellable, but they took a 30% damage reduction. Now the glyph has been redesigned to where you only take a 15% damage reduction. Does this mean that you take it? No. It's not a good glyph. Is it a buff? Yes. Is it usable yet? No. Next glyph, Mind Freeze. Previously, when you glyphed it, the cost of your Mind Freeze would actually go up by 20 runic power, and its cooldown would be reduced by 2 seconds. Now the glyph is changed where your cooldown only gets reduced by 1 second, but the cost has been cut in half to only 10. So it's a buff and a nerf all at the same time. And I can say that it's decent. You might see it being used in PvP. I'm not sure if I will personally, but I can see people possibly getting behind it. That 1 second could be, you know, a big difference. Finally, the last glyph we're going to be going over is the Glyph of Outbreak. On its own, Outbreak has a 1-minute cooldown, and the way it works is you target an enemy, you hit Outbreak, and it applies them with both Frost Fever and Blood Plague. Now, when you glyphed it, it made it so it did not have its 1-minute cooldown, but it would cost 40 runic power per cast. Now with the glyph, it's been buffed to where now it only costs 30 runic power to cast, so it's going to cost you 10 runic power a shot. While that is good, it's still not good enough to be a mainstream glyph. I can tell you steer clear from this. Basically, the best way you're going to be setting up is you're going to be glyphing AMS, Death and Decay, and maybe Dark Simulacrum, maybe a few others. Kind of the glyphs that we're using now currently in 5.3. So, while the glyph changes were okay, it's still nothing new that we need or can use yet. Alright guys, that was part 2 of the 5.4 PTR Death Knight changes. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, feel free to leave a comment and a like below, telling me what you hope comes with Death Knights in 5.4. Personally, I'm still dreaming of when every DK gets to have Bone Shield. The day that happens is the day I am so happy. It's probably a long ways away, but that's what I want. What do you guys want? Let me know in the comment section below, and as always, have a good one.